This is Stone Cold Export, and before we start this video, I would first like to say that I did manage to place an order for an RX 6800, and I did get a confirmation email that I indeed will be receiving a 6800, but I don't know if it will be this week or next week, because they said they didn't have all the cards in stock yet, and I'm not sure. I do believe mine is in stock, but we'll see. I finally managed to get my hands on an RTX 3070 card, and this is the Gigabyte RTX 3070 Eagle OC, and this is one of the lower end models, but hopefully the performance is still there. In the box you get a simple quick start guide, and then there is the card itself, and that's pretty much it really. This card features triple 80mm fans and a heatsink with 4 heat pipes. The middle fan spins in the opposite direction in true Gigabyte fashion, and it has the cutout in the back plate for air to flow through, and the back plate is metal, by the way, which is nice. This card is only a dual slot model, so it's fairly thin, but hopefully the cooler performance will still be good. On the back plate there is some blue text. It's not too bad. I do wish they chose a more neutral color, but I guess it's okay. The fan shroud is plastic, and the top portion with the Gigabyte logo appears to be acrylic, and you get an RGB light strip underneath the Gigabyte logo. And Gigabyte has opted for dual HDMI 2.1 ports here and dual display ports, 1.4A on the back. The card is powered by one 8-pin and one 6-pin power connector, and I do really like the fact that they have enclosed the end of the cooler, so you do not see the ends of the heat pipes. Good job, Gigabyte. Before we get into performance figures, let's see how good this cooler actually is. Alright, so let's start off with one of the most important aspects of a graphics card, in my opinion anyway: noise. Noise is measured 30 centimeters away from the fans in an open-air test bench, and here the Eagle OC actually did fairly good. 42.4 dBA is a good result in this test, especially given that this is an entry-level model. It's actually a bit more silent than the Aorus 5700 XT that I have in my current system. Now let's see how fast those fans were actually spinning. This card does feature fan stop, by the way, so it is as silent as can be when idle. On the low though, the fans spin up to 2150 RPM or 2150 RPM to keep the 3070 cool. If you do want to target 40 dBA, that is achieved at 1810 RPM, at 30 centimeters anyway. So let's see what the temperatures were like. In a 22 degrees Celsius room, the Eagle OC from Gigabyte managed to keep the 3070 at 68.5 degrees Celsius, which is very good indeed. If you want more silence, you can trade some of that temperature for silence. At 40 dBA, the 3070 Eagle OC peaked at 74 degrees Celsius, which is still perfectly safe, and personally I would probably set up a custom fan curve to target 40 dBA, just because I like the silence. So let's move on to the gaming benchmarks then. I tested 15 games at 1080p, 1440p and 4K, and I tested 4 games with ray tracing, and I tested a couple of games overclocked. So the test system today was an Intel i5-10600K at 4.9 GHz with a 4.8 GHz cache clock, running with 16 GB of 4266 MHz CL16 memory on a Gigabyte Aorus C490 Elite AC motherboard. In some cases we are CPU limited at 1080p with the 3070, so do keep that in mind. Let's kick things off with ANNO 1800. In ANNO 1800 at 1080p, the RTX 3070 delivered 133.1 frames per second on average, which is about 25% faster than the 2070 Super. Now I do realize that a comparison with a 2070 would be more appropriate, but I feel that the 2070 Super is what the 2070 should have been from the start. And of course I don't have a 2070, so there's that as well. The 3070 is also a whopping 47% ahead of the 5700 XT here, and if you are still using a 1070 and didn't feel like the 2000 series was a worthy upgrade, this thing is 90% faster than the 1070 here. At 1440p there is more of the same. The 3070 dominates the other cards here and is now almost twice as fast as the GTX 1070. Moving up to 4K, and this is where the card really shines. 35% faster than the 2070 Super and twice as fast as the GTX 1070. Next title we're looking at is Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and this is rather disappointing really. I'm not sure I retested it, but I'm getting the same number. So the 3070, 2070 Super, and 5700 XT performance is virtually identical here. Moving up to 1440p, it's basically more the same. When running this test, it didn't seem like we were notably CPU limited, as the GPU had like 98% usage, but maybe this game is just not very well optimized, I don't know. 4K is our final chance to spot a difference, and the 3070 does pull slightly ahead here. If you like racing sims, the next game is right up your alley. Assetto Corsa Competitzione, there is no other way to say this though, this game does favor Nvidia cards. The 3070 is 30% ahead of the 2070 Super, but 65% ahead of the 5700 XT, and again, almost twice as fast as the 1070. The 5700 XT is actually just 19% ahead of the 1070 here. At 1440p, the 3070 is now 43% faster than the 2070 Super, indicating that we may have been slightly CPU limited at 1080p. Now it is a massive 79% faster than the 5700 XT, and again, about twice as fast as the 1070. At 4K, this card really gets to stretch its legs, 59% ahead of the 2070 Super now, and more than twice as fast as both the 5700 XT and the 1070, which perform the same here. Moving on to Battlefield 5, at 1080p, the 3070 is only 16% faster than the 2070 Super, and about on par with the 5700 XT, still way faster than the 1070 though, and 93% faster actually here at 1080p. 1440p is next, and it's really more the same, 17% faster than the 2070 Super, and about the same performance as the 5700 XT. At 4K, it does start to pull away from the 5700 XT, now being 18% faster than both the 2070 Super and 5700 XT, and over twice as fast as the 1070. Next up is the rival Call of Duty Modern Warfare, 28% ahead of the 2070 Super here and 21% in front of the 5700 XT. As usual though, it is more than twice as fast as the 1070. At 1440p, it's pretty much the same story as before. The 3070 is the fastest, but only about 20% ahead of second place, which is the 5700 XT. 4K then, and yes, now the 3070 gets to flex its muscles, 38% faster than the 2070 Super and 29% faster than the 5700 XT. Control is up next, and here we see a healthy lead for the 3070 at 1080p, 43% ahead of the 2070 Super here and 55% faster than the 5700 XT. It's also about 162% faster than the 1070, which is just nuts. At 1440p, it's pulling slightly further ahead of the others, 65% faster than the 5700 XT now, and closing in on 3 times as fast as the 1070. Let's see if 4K can get us there. In 4K, the 3070 is indeed more than 3 times as fast as the GTX 1070, and it also has a healthy 60% lead over the 2070 Super and 79% lead over the 5700 XT. This card performs rather good at 4K, at least compared to the other ones in this test. Next game then, Devil May Cry 5. Here I did observe a slight CPU limitation at 1080p, by the way. At 1080p, the 3070 delivered 230.9 frames per second average, and that puts it 19% ahead of the 2070 Super and 32% ahead of the 5700 XT. But as usual, it's twice as fast as the GTX 1070. At 1440p, it extended its lead over the 2070 Super to 23% and 35% versus the 5700 XT. Moving to 4K, and the lead is further extended, not by a lot though, 27% ahead of the 2070 Super and a more substantial 49% ahead of the 5700 XT. Moving on to the Division 2 then, at 1080p we got 142.8 frames per second on average, 30% ahead of the 2070 Super and 33% faster than the 5700 XT. Over twice as fast as the 1070 though, as usual. On to 1440p, here it's more the same really, around 30% faster than the 2070 Super and 5700 XT. Let's get on to 4K. 4K slightly further ahead here, around 35% versus the 2070 Super and 5700 XT, and a whopping 5 times faster than the 1070, which never really were a 4K card anyway. Now let's take a look at Doom Eternal. At 1080p, the 3070 is pushing out 289.8 frames per second on average, 27% more than the 2070 Super and 36% more than the 5700 XT. Let's move on to 1440p. It's pretty much more the same, 25 to 30% ahead of the 2070 Super and 5700 XT, and demolishing the 1070 as always. Maybe 4K will let the 3070 stretch its legs a bit. Yeah, not really. Pretty much the same delta here as before, pretty respectable performance still though. Forza Horizon 4 is up next, and at 1080p the 3070 is closing in on 200 frames per second average. We are slightly CPU limited here though, so the 3070 is only 14% ahead of the 2070 Super, which isn't much. At 1440p, the 3070 has a 20% lead over the 2070 Super, which still isn't all that impressive really, but we'll take it. 28% faster than the 5700 XT and more than twice as fast as the 1070. Things are looking up a bit at 4K. Here the 3070 is 29% ahead of the 2070 Super and 37% ahead of the 5700 XT. Not too bad. Next up is Ghost Recon Breakpoint. At 1080p, the 3070 is only 16% ahead of the 2070 Super, which again isn't all that great. Let's move on to 1440p to see if there was a CPU limitation. Well, it doesn't look great at 1440p either, to be honest. The 3070 is a mere 14% ahead of the 2070 Super here, so surely 4K should allow the 3070 to show its power. Well, it's 21% ahead of the 2070 Super at 4K, but I was expecting a bit more if I'm honest. Let's just move on to another game, The Outer Worlds. At 1080p we get 138.9 frames per second on average from the 3070, again only 14% ahead of the 2070 Super, but a decent 45% faster than the 5700 XT. Moving to 1440p, and now the 3070 is 21% ahead of the 2070 Super and 49% ahead of the 5700 XT. At 4K, the 3070 is now up to 29% ahead of the 2070 Super, so it's looking better. Also a decent 56.5% ahead of the 5700 XT, even though not even the 3070 managed to reach 60 frames per second on average. Rainbow Six Siege is our next title, and I have left out the 0.1% low here because there is a bit of a stutter in the beginning of the benchmark, and that sometimes messes up the results. Here the 3070 reaches 371.2 frames per second on average, 27% ahead of the 2070 Super and 20% ahead of the 5700 XT. Upping the resolution to 1440p, and now the 3070 is almost reaching 240 frames per second on average, 31% faster than the 2070 Super and 23% faster than the 5700 XT. At 4K, 3070 is once again able to extend its lead, now up to 40% ahead of the 2070 Super and 41% ahead of the 5700 XT. And this brings us to our second to last game, Shadow of the Tomb Raider. At 1080p, the 3070 is able to do 146 frames per second on average, 27% ahead of the 2070 Super and 33% faster than the 5700 XT. At 1440p, it's pretty much more the same again, although it's now up to 39% faster than the 5700 XT. At 4K then, the 3070 is now 32% faster than the 2070 Super and 47% faster than the 5700 XT. Last game now, The Witcher 3 at 1080p, the 3070 is 13% ahead of the 2070 Super and 32% faster than the 5700 XT, upping the resolution to 1440p, and now the 3070 is still pushing well over 100 frames per second on average, now being 17% faster than the 2070 Super and 36% faster than the 5700 XT. Only 4K left now. So the 3070 here is 24% faster than the 2070 Super and the only card to breach 60 frames per second on average. Now I have some overclocking numbers to show you. The power limit is locked to 100 on this card, 100%. But despite that, I did manage to add 140 to the core clock and 1000 to the memory clock in Afterburner. And I only ran a couple of games at 1440p with the overclock. First off is Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Here the 3070 gained an 8% performance boost with the overclock, and the next title is Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and again the 3070 gained the same 8% performance increase in this title. Now let's move on to ray tracing performance. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider with ray trace shadows set to max or ultra, the 3070 is 34% faster than the 2070 Super and 55% faster than the 2060 Super. At 1440p, the 3070 is 24% faster than the 2070 Super and 43% faster than the 2060 Super. And yeah, next game is Control, and here the 3070 is 30% faster than the 2070 Super at 1080p high settings and 41% faster than the 2060 Super. Moving up to 1440p, and now the 3070 is 34% faster than the 2070 Super and 46% ahead of the 2060 Super. A bit dumb to try ray tracing at 4K, but here we go. The 3070 failed to reach 30 frames per second average, but it is 47% ahead of the 2070 Super and 60% faster than the 2060 Super, which both failed to reach 20 frames per second on average. Next up is Call of Duty Modern Warfare. No 2060 Super data here for this one, I'm afraid. At 1080p, the 3070 is 36% ahead of the 2070 Super, and that remains the same at 1440p and increases to 47% at 4K. Last game for ray tracing is Battlefield 5. At 1080p, the 3070 is 43% ahead of the 2070 Super and 66% faster than the 2060 Super. At 1440p, the deltas remain the same, and at 4K it increases to 54% faster than the 2070 Super and 80% faster than the 2060 Super. Now let's take a quick look at relative performance at 1080p. We're using the GTX 1070 as our baseline, and the 3070 is on average across these 15 games more than twice as fast as the GTX 1070, so GTX 1070 owners can safely upgrade at this point, as Jensen himself alluded to in his launch video. At 1080p, the 3070 is on average 37% faster than the 2070 Super and 48% faster than the 5700 XT. If we move up to 1440p, the 3070 is on average 41.4% faster than the 2070 Super and 51% faster than the 5700 XT, and again more than twice as fast as the 1070 on average. At 4K is where the largest difference lies though. The 3070 is 2.3 times faster than the 1070 at this resolution, 56% faster than the 2070 Super and 69% faster than the 5700 XT. Next we will look at value at 1440p. With the 3070 you are paying $3.9 per averaged FPS, which makes it even better value than the 5700 XT, at least at MSRP. And I'm curious where the RX 6800 will place in this graph when I get it, but we'll see. Maybe, well, probably next week. Now let's take a quick look at power draw and efficiency. Here are watts while running control at 1440p with high settings. The values here are power out from the PSU's 12-volt rail. While running control, this system with the 3070 used 328 watts, which is actually less than what the 5700 XT system pulled, but about 30 watts more than the 2070 Super. Not bad at all really. This means that watt per average FPS was 3.4 for the 3070, which is considerably better than the 5700 XT and a bit of an improvement over the 2070 Super. Now it's time to grade the card, and for the conclusion. For noise this card receives a B. I have removed the build quality grade as I felt it was too subjective, but for temperature the card manages an A actually. Based on this, I do recommend this model if you are in the market for a 3070 and don't mind the blue text. For the same price as a 2070 Super, we now get more performance and better efficiency. If you are using a 2070 Super or 5700 XT, I don't personally think it's worth upgrading. However, if you are using a 1070 or similar, then this thing is twice as fast and a bit more expensive than what the 1070 was back in 2016. The Gigabyte RTX 3070 Eagle OC has a good cooling solution. It's fairly quiet and not too expensive. The non-OC version is supposed to be at the MSRP, I believe, and it would be my pick. It's pretty much identical, and you can give it a slight overclock and it would match or exceed the performance of the OC model. The only drawback I can find for the 3070 is the 8GB frame buffer. So this is a 70 class card, and the 70 class card has had 8GB VRAM since 2016. So I would have liked to see 10 maybe, or something like that. So yeah, even though it only has 8GB, it does seem to be plenty, really, when you look at the 4K benchmarks. So anyway, that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I will get the RX 6800 video out as soon as I can, and this card will go for sale shortly. So thanks for watching, and farewell for now.